For 30 years, I've been warning people in my books and in every other way I can that this world is controlled by a cult. It's a cult that has no borders. It operates in all the, at least major countries, and in fact, all the countries in the end, and particular in those countries that dictate the direction of the world. So the cult will be at the core of the system in China. It will be at the core of the system in America, etc., etc., etc. And so what have I said in this 30 years that this cult wants? I've said, and I've said it in the chats we've had before, it wants to create a beyond Orwellian global state in which a tiny few people dictate to everyone else. I've referred to this as the Hunger Games society. And you can picture the structure very clearly. Picture a pyramid. At the top of the pyramid, you've got a tiny few enormously wealthy people that actually are connected to this cult. We now have a name for them. We call them the 1%. At the bottom of this pyramid in the Hunger Games society is basically the rest of humanity that is dependent upon the 1%. And in between the two is a vicious, merciless police military state to impose the will of the 1% on the population and to prevent the population challenging the 1%. And this Hunger Games society is not classic fascism, it's not classic communism, although the outcome in terms of tyranny is the same. It is a technocracy. A technocracy is defined as a society that is controlled by bureaucrats, experts, scientists, engineers, technocrats. And the ability of that situation to happen is through smart technology and AI. The idea is that everything will be connected to AI. This is what the Internet of Things is all about. And if you listen to the crazies in Silicon Valley, they're telling you that in the period around 2030, a year that keeps coming up from all directions, we will have a situation where the human brain will start to be connected to AI. And thus, whoever controls AI will be connecting and driving the perceptions of humanity. And that can be done from a central point through this smart grid, global smart grid. So that's the structure that they want. They also want a society completely cashless, where everything is digital money, a single one world currency, which will be run through this smart grid. Now, in the same 30 years, I've been saying there are two major techniques that are being used to bring about that situation. One, I've called since the 1990s problem, reaction, solution, where you covertly create a problem, you use the unquestioning, pathetic mainstream media to tell the public the version of the problem you want them to believe. And you're looking at stage two, the reaction, for fear, that's the currency of control, outrage, whatever the problem is, and either a demand from the public that something must be done, or at least an acceptance from the public that things need to change because of the problem. And at that point, those who've created the problem got that reaction openly in changes in society, offer the solutions to the problems they have themselves covertly created. And those changes, step by step, take us further and further to that Hunger Games society. There's another version, which I call no problem reaction solution, where you don't need a real problem, you just need the perception of one, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and you still have the ability to provide your society-changing solution. Where you start at A, and you know you're going to Z, but you know if you go in too big a leap, people will look up from the game show and the latest Simon Cowell and say, what's going on, because the change is so great. So you do it in as big a steps as you can towards your outcome, but not so fast or big that you alert too many people to the fact that it's a pattern. What you want people to believe is everything is random. And I have this other phrase which relates to all this: know the outcome and you'll see the journey. If you don't know where this world is being taken by this cult, then everything seems random. Coronavirus, random. Climate change, random. Economic crash, random. But when you know where we're being taken, you know the outcome, this Hunger Games structure society, now the apparently random events become clear stepping stones to that outcome. And another point, you know, have we not learned yet to take what the authorities tell us with a pinch of salt until it's proved otherwise? This Hunger Games society, I've been saying this for a long time, is designed to have no small business, no even medium-sized business globally, just gigantic corporations that control and produce everything. Amazon is a classic example of what I'm talking about. What this coronavirus hysteria is creating is a situation unfolding by the hour worldwide that is destroying small business, family business, even medium-sized business, some even relatively big businesses too. It's destroying them. The big legacy of what is happening now will not be to do with health long term, it will be economic.
I agree with
It's going to be catastrophic. Now, here's the point. What happens to those people whose businesses collapse? What happens to all those people who were working for those businesses? For bars, for hotels, for all these businesses that have been targeted, don't go there, shut down. What happens to them? They fall into the bottom of the Hunger Games society. And what we're seeing now, every day, is this Hunger Games society coming closer and closer and closer because of what's being done in the name of protecting the people. I got news for you. You go deep enough into this system, they don't give a shit about the people. We are being asked to believe now that this system cares about old people. We must protect the old people. We must destroy the world economy to protect the old people. Oh, these would be the old people, would they, that have paid in their entire life through taxation and other means, and at the end, in their final years, they get handed a pittance of a pension, which gives them the choice between being warm or being hungry. And what does that do? When people are going without essential things, because the system doesn't care, and they're having to buy shite food, because that's all they can afford. They can't have nutrients to boost their immune systems because they can't afford them, and the mainstream everything's not telling them they need them anyway. And at the same time, they're breathing in shit air, drinking toxic water and other drinks, being deluged with sugar, which has a phenomenally destructive impact on the immune system. All this is going on. We're living in a an electromagnetic, technologically generated soup of radiation toxicity. And this system has allowed that to happen, has allowed corporations to do that, and now, having done all that, that's devastated the lives and the immune systems of old people, we are being asked to believe that the system cares about the health of the elderly. It doesn't give a shit. And I'm not talking about the nurses. I'm not talking about the doctors. I'm talking about that at the core which is driving this. And the idea that all these things are being done to protect the elderly, they don't give a shit about the elderly. The elderly are an excuse to impose the very society that I'm talking about. Now, if you look at when these things happen and great Orwellian, draconian things are put in place. Oh, we've got to do this because of the problem. Well, the problem eventually passes. This virus will eventually flatten out. But what you see every time, 9/11's a classic, they'll roll back some of it, but not nearly roll back to where it was before. The whole thing's moved on, closer to the Hunger Games society. Another thing you're going to see, oh, and by the way, I mentioned that a great goal of this, and I've been saying this, when did I first write this? About 1993. They want a cashless society, a digital cashless society, one world currency, which has phenomenal implications for freedom. They want rid of cash. And when I said that, there was lots of cash in circulation. People going, end of cash? Now look at it. And you know, what was it this guy Tedros, the head of the World Health Organization, a man I wouldn't trust to tell me the time in a room full of clocks, by the way, he said, don't touch cash. Use cards because the virus can pass on through cash. I've come up here today for this chat 3 times in places that are always cash. I had cash turned down. No, we weren't taking cards. And when this runs on, they're going to be justifying a cashless society on the basis of that you can pass viruses on through it. They're going to be saying, we can't have this again. We can't have this happen again. So you're going to have more technological testing of people for whether they have a temperature and all this stuff. And the whole surveillance is going to move on, exactly as it has in China. Right. If people thought China had reached the point of beyond Orwellian, well, you just look what they've brought in as a result of this coronavirus. The way the whole economic system is being shut down is suicide. And what happens when it reaches a point where in its present state, it cannot continue, it cannot survive. A whole new economic system comes in, which is the one this cult wants. And I'll tell you another thing. I've been going on for years and years and years about the fact that the idea of human-caused climate change is a joke. It's a hoax. And people say, well, why would they hoax climate change? You look at all the solutions to climate change, and again and again and again, they are exactly the same solutions and consequences as with the coronavirus. What did Prince Charles say at Davos only a matter of 2 months or so ago? He said by 2030, this year that keeps coming up all over the place from all directions, we need a new global economic system, economic order to meet the challenge of climate change. What have I been writing for 30 years? This cult wants to transform the world economic order into this technocratic, AI-controlled tyranny. And both the coronavirus and the climate change hoax are providing the problem, I would say in many ways the illusion of the problem, not least with human-caused climate change, to offer the solution of exactly what they want, which is a transformed, centrally controlled, AI-controlled world economic system, which will not have mom-and-pop businesses anymore. It won't have small businesses. What a pandemic does is it kicks in this survival mechanism. And it means that not only will you accept authority imposing tyranny, you will demand that authority imposes tyranny. And something else. Tell you what one of the punchlines of this virus is. It's the bloody vaccine. You know, very early on after this virus started, I read a report about an Israeli government minister saying we're far ahead of anyone else in developing a vaccine. Oh, really? I thought this is interesting. And it turns out that from 2016, this scientific organization in Israel, which is all connected to the government like they all are, had been using coronavirus to test its technology. And so because of that, it's further along the road, it says, to developing a vaccine. And one of the scientists said, it was pure luck that we chose that. Well, some may believe that. And some of us may say, well, I think I'll hold on that one, thanks. And then when you've got all these other areas of the world where they're developing a vaccine, we have already had Denmark announce that any vaccine for coronavirus will be mandatory. Now, if you can give me a better definition of fascism than the state telling you what will go into your body, then I'd like to bloody hear it. You want to introduce a vaccine. What is in the vaccine, what we're not told is in it, or whatever, we don't know. But, whoa, oh, we're all gonna die, vaccinate me. Don't even think about it. Survival mechanism. But
what if that is the only solution?
Well, who decides that it's the only solution? My children, my boys, have not been vaccinated once in their life. They didn't have childhood diseases. Their immune systems are on fire because they weren't compromised by a tidal wave of toxic shite while their immune systems were still developing. Do you know something? In the 1980s, the Congress gave immunity from prosecution to the drug companies for vaccines. And you know why this was in the official documentation. The reason they said they gave them immunity from prosecution, so now in America there is a vaccine court which has already paid out something like $42 billion for vaccine injuries, and the bar to prove that is very high. It's now paid by the taxpayer. And so the drug companies have no economic consequences for damaging vaccinations. And
I think they're trying to get drug companies to consider creating vaccines because they're not economically profitable.
Hold on. What, not economically profitable? My goodness me. Have you seen the profits of drug companies?
Yeah, because they have regular medicine.
But the point is that the reason they said we must give immunity is because they said vaccines are innately unsafe and cannot be made not to be. Thus, we're going to give you immunity so you'll continue making them. Because at that point, before that legislation came in, the drug companies were facing a massive number of lawsuits for vaccine injuries. Now, you know what's happened since that legislation in 1986? The number of vaccines and the different kinds of vaccines have absolutely exploded. Why? Because there's no consequence anymore. And if you look at the statistics, if you vaccinate a large number of people, you are going to have major life-changing implications for a number of those people. So what mandatory vaccinations are saying is, we are going to insist by law that your children are vaccinated, and we know by doing that that some of them who wouldn't otherwise have been vaccinated are going to take the consequences.
Right, because it's for the greater good.
Oh, the greater good. They
So-
couldn't care less about the greater good. Can we just understand that? And then we might get some kind of grasp on how this world is run. They don't care about us. They use the excuse of caring about us to justify what they want to do. It's as simple as that. Now they're using the elderly to shut down the economic system as an excuse, involving people who economically will be absolutely destroyed already, never mind as it goes on. And
Everyone is scared now because they can't see this thing. They can't understand this thing. We can get our heads around war. Maybe we can get our heads around a nuclear weapon, but you can't get your head around this, so it scares you more, and you can manipulate people's minds with this thing.
Of course you can.
Better than anything.
There's no better way of manipulating perception than to trigger the survival mechanism. There's none greater. And so what you're going to have, coming around to what I was saying, is you're going to have pressure from those who have their survival mechanism triggered for governments to make the vaccine compulsory. And people who will not have it are going to be demonized and vilified, just as people who won't have their children vaccinated now are doing so. And you know, when they say there's been this outbreak, it's the anti-vaxxers, they never tell us how many people or how many kids or whatever who've got some disease like measles or whatever. They never tell us how many have been vaccinated and how many haven't. My boys' mates at school were getting diseases they had been vaccinated for. My boys who were not vaccinated were not getting them. Discuss.
All right, to discuss,
Right.
Let's talk about technology and what they're doing in China.
I've been saying for decades, if you want to know what is planned for the West tomorrow, look at China today. It's no accident that China is right at the center of this whole outbreak, which has gone on to create all this. This is how it works in China. They have millions of face recognition cameras in their cities, gathering in number all the time. And so as you're walking down the street, you are able to be tracked and identified literally in minutes. There have been documentaries that have put someone on the street, and the technology has been challenged to track them and find them. It's taken minutes, gotcha. And so what they're doing, and remember, this is what's planned for the West, and this is why the crazies and the psychopaths in Silicon Valley are so close to China, if the truth be told. You are so tracked in detail in China that they know everything you do all the time, and AI is logging your behavior. And they have something called the social credit system. And when you act in ways that are acceptable to the state, you get credits, social credits. When you act in ways that the state doesn't want you to behave, you get credits taken away. And when you fall below a certain level, consequences kick in. How many people know that millions of Chinese people have been banned from flying? Millions of Chinese people have been banned from going on trains because their social credit score has fallen below the acceptable level. And this is what is possible once you have AI able to track you in detail, minute by minute, in real time, which is what they have in China. What is China? It's a technocracy. That's what it is. And if you look at China today, that's supposed to be the world tomorrow. And this whole cult technique through the ages has been frighten, change, frighten, change, frighten, change. The technique of creative destruction. Wars are classic creative destruction events. You destroy the status quo, as they're destroying this one now. You then, a bit further along the line, you have another reason to fear, which transforms that status quo. And with each change of status quo, you're going closer and closer to the Hunger Games society that's been the plan all along. And if we grasp this and we stay calm and we don't fall into this terror of the unknown, then we can start pushing back on this simply by refusing to cooperate. Refusing to cooperate with our own enslavement. A few can only enslave billions if the billions acquiesce. And through fear of death and fear of this and fear of that, fear of the virus, billions are acquiescing to the few. That's what happens when this survival mechanism is triggered. And we need to go beyond it, not fall into that, and look at things dispassionately, calmly, and we'll see what we'll never see. And then we've got a chance. See, this is why, Brian, I've emphasized this a number of times today. Please, they do not give a shit about you. So, when they tell you they do, there's a reason for it, and it's not for your benefit. Because if they give a shit about you, you would not be in the situation you're in. The world would not be as it is. You wouldn't have something like 6 people have as much wealth as the poorest half of the population if they gave a shit about you. So when they tell you they do, they're lying, and they're lying for a reason, to get something as a result of you believing that they actually are trying to protect you. They're not trying to protect old people. They couldn't give a damn. They don't want old people. It's in their documents over the years. They don't want old people. Because old people, oh no, they can't serve the system anymore. So what did Kissinger call them? Useless eaters. That's what he called them. And that's how they perceive them. And now we're supposed to believe that this is all to protect them. Oh, please, do me a favor. We need to wake up to the fact that something beyond frickin' evil is running this world. I've been trying to get this out for all these years, and I do understand why. Because people do not have in their lives in general experience of undiluted evil that has no empathy and no compassion and no emotional consequence for anything it does. When you don't have that in your life, and most people don't, it's very difficult to grasp the scale of evil that's running this world. And the idea that they are trying to protect us by taking our freedom away is such a joke, it's unbelievable. And everybody has the power to use their mind to dictate their own reality. Why is it that this cult, this system, is so desperate to control human perception? Because it knows human perception becomes human experience. And if we fall into states of fear, we are going to manifest fear, reasons to fear all around us. But if we take our minds back, we take our consciousness back, we can create a different reality. Because what is human society? It's the sum total of human perception. Human perception changes, human society must change, because it's just a reflection of the sum total of human perception. We love each other, we live in a loving world. We hate each other, we live in a world of hate. We fear, we live in a world world of fear. We are in control. It's very difficult to manipulate people, impossible to manipulate people when you understand the game. Because how does problem, reaction, solution manipulate you when you understand how it works? What does every tyranny want to do? Centralize everything, including perception. The more we celebrate our uniqueness, the more we are withdrawing from the ability of the few at the center to dictate to everybody. You will think this. I won't. You will say that. You won't say that. I will. What they're going to do? Why do people acquiesce and self-censor? Fear.
Right.
Get rid of fear, the world changes. Because the world is controlled by fear. Delete fear, delete control. This is the headline to start with, which will shock a lot of people, I'm sure. There is no COVID-19. It doesn't exist. And I'm going to explain today why that is and how, therefore, a pandemic perception could be pulled off. Now, one of the doctors that I've been looking at is called Andrew Caulfield. He is a medical doctor in America. He works in psychiatry now. And he, like a lot of these doctors you'll never see on the BBC, started looking at the sequence of events that's led us to where we are now. And this is how it went. People started getting ill, for whatever reason, in China. And the Chinese authorities took genetic material from the fluid in the lungs of people who got ill. Only a few, a very small number. And they found what we would call genetic material. It wasn't an isolated virus. It was genetic material which can be there from a long list of causes, including lung cancer, by the way. And they decided that what was causing the illness was a virus, which has got the name COVID-19. But at no time did they isolate that so-called virus from the rest of the genetic material, much of which will be found in the bodies of most people. So they start out, before they started testing, diagnosing people in China from symptoms. And you will have heard this constantly recurring theme about coronavirus or COVID-19, because there's lots of coronaviruses, COVID-19 symptoms. And you'll hear this recurring line, flu-like symptoms. Now, these flu-like symptoms can be caused by a great range of different causes. But they decided on symptoms, which could come from many different causes, that those symptoms were now COVID-19. So you had flu-like symptoms, COVID-19. COVID-19. And so the numbers got bigger and bigger. And when we get to 5G, there is another element to this, which I also want to talk about in relation to China and in relation to the West as well. But they then develop this test, or start using this test, to test for COVID-19. And it's called an RT-PCR test. And, wait for it, it doesn't test for COVID-19. It tests for the genetic material, which has loads of different content, caused by many, many, many different possible causes. And if you test positive for the genetic material, not COVID-19, you are diagnosed to have COVID-19, and if you die, to have died from it. Now let's look at this RT-PCR test. It was developed, invented by a guy called Carey Mullis, a biochemist in America, in 1984. And it's used to try to diagnose many things. The same test has been used to try to diagnose lung cancer. The same test of genetic material that they are saying, you test positive, you've got COVID-19. Now, what did this Carey Mullis say, the inventor of the test? Oh, must get more people tested for COVID-19. The inventor of the test, what did he say? This test should not be used to diagnose infectious disease. The inventor of it said that. What are they doing to tell us who has and has not got this so-called COVID-19? The test that he says shouldn't be used for that very thing. So you test for this genetic material and you've got COVID-19, but there's another part of this. What this test does is it amplifies the material. In other words, it makes it larger, keep it simple, and as it gets larger in the cycles of amplification, what you say is causing the disease gets bigger and you can see it more, or say you can. I'm going to come to that in a second. But all the other content of the genetic material also gets amplified. And loads of this genetic material is already in the body of virtually everybody. And this is how the test works. You can fix the figures so easy like this. You do, say, 30, 35 cycles of amplification. You're going to bring into the test positive a series of things within that genetic material that become there to be seen at that level. So you're going to get some positives, which you're going to call COVID-19, but you're going to get some negatives because you haven't brought all that material into the testing process. But you amplify the genetic material, say, I don't know, 60 times. You have brought so much of the content of the genetic material to be entering the test process that at that level of amplification, virtually everybody will test positive, because all the genetic material that's in most people's body will now be testing positive in the test through this greater amplification. This means that the number of cycles of amplification you use, say in different countries, dictates how many positive tests you get. And therefore, all you've got to do is increase the amplification. You're going to get more and more positives, and you're going to call them COVID-19.
And amplification is how sensitive that test is.
Another thing is that in 1890, a guy called Robert Koch, who was a bacteriologist and a physician, he developed something called the Koch postulates. And these were 4 criteria for proving that an agent, a so-called infectious agent, is the cause of what you say it is. This includes everyone who is subject to this agent has the same symptoms. 2, that you have isolated this agent, call it a virus, bacteria, whatever. You've isolated it, so there's no other material, only that. So there's no contamination, there's no false positives in the way I've described. You are only isolating that. But when you take that and you, say, inject it into a living host, that host will get what you say that is causing. And when you've got that host, you are able, number 4, to take that material you say is causing the illness, the infectious illness, out of the person, and again inject it into someone else, and they will get it. In terms of COVID-19, not one single one of those 4 postulates, which have been used since 1890 by mainstream medicine the world over to prove that this is infecting and causing that, not one of them have been used and fulfilled. None of them. So then we come to something else that Andrew Kaufman identified, which was a tremendous piece of observation and research. You can see it in his video on david.com when this is over. What happens when a cell gets poisoned is it secretes something called exosomes. This is part of the natural, everyday immune system response to poison cells. And these exosomes, as they are released, and they're only released when the cell is poisoned, and it can be poisoned through many, many reasons. It can be toxicity. Wait for this one. It can be poisoned through stress and fear. You imagine the stress and fear that's going on in the world now during this lockdown. It can be caused by disease, infection, and it can be caused by electromagnetic fields, which will become very relevant when we get into 5G. So these exosomes are released, and one of the roles of exosomes is poison cells warning other cells as they travel around. There's a problem. Get ready. Look, there's a problem here. So all you have to do to get exosomes released is to have poison cells by these various reasons. What Kaufman started looking at was under the microscope pictures of exosomes, what they look like. And then he looked at an under the microscope picture of what is claimed to be COVID-19. These two were exactly the same. He then starts looking at the genetic makeup of the exosomes, which you will find in the lung fluid of people who have problems with the lungs, because the problems are generating the release of exosomes. And he looked at the genetic makeup claimed for COVID-19. They are exactly the same in every relevant way. An exosome and so-called COVID-19 even lock into the same cell receptors as each other. They are, as Kaufman has clearly shown, the same thing. So what's gone on here is they've taken a natural response mechanism of the body, immune system, to poisonous cells, and they've renamed it COVID-19. Now, this genetic material they've taken from the lungs of people, and what is the basis of this test, will contain, by its very nature, these exosomes. So they're finding a natural human immune system response mechanism, this secretion from poison cells, and they're calling it COVID-19. And because anyone who has any level of cellular toxicity is going to produce these exosomes, then the potential for positive tests, yes, COVID-19 is a pandemic, is endless. They want, and when I say they, I mean this cult, which controls the pyramid of reaction. They obviously want as many dead people as possible that can be designated COVID-19, because that adds to this whole pandemic.
And we're going to talk about why later.
We are going to talk about why, because it's a very, very big and simple reason why. And it relates to why there's a lockdown at all. But what's clearly happening is that old people in hospital, for anything, first of all, they're being tested for COVID-19, this genetic material. And for reasons I've explained, they're going to, a lot of them are going to test positive. Not for the virus, for the genetic material. They're going to them, and according to loved ones and families, the people on the ward, etc., have said to them it's government policy. And they're trying to get these old people. You know the old people that the lockdown was to protect? Yeah, right. They're trying to get them to sign do not resuscitate forms, which means they can be allowed to die and not resuscitate. And when they die without resuscitation, they will be called COVID-19. Have you noticed how this is now starting to seep out? Oh, we may have to make choices about
the triage,
about who we treat, you know, and the older people. Well, you know, we're going to have to make some hard choices. Old people that you're telling not to resuscitate, to sign non-resuscitation forms, right? So they are despicably abusing the very old people that they say this lockdown is to protect. One of the family members that contacted me talked about her 83-year-old mother who was in hospital for an orthopedic reason. Not some bloody virus. And the doctors came along to her and tried to get her to sign a do not resuscitate form, for she's got an orthopedic problem. And you know, she had faculties about her and she refused, but a lot of people won't, because a lot of old people won't, they won't know what's going on.
And they're trying to get them to sign it so they can save the other people.
That's what they say. But what I mean, Orwellian language, Brian, you have to invert everything. They're getting them to sign it so that they can let them die. And everyone who dies is a COVID-19 because they're tested. This is the scam that's going on. So what does 5G do? What does 4G do, but 5G even more? It poisons the cells, which get poisoned by technological electromagnetic fields. The cells get poisoned. They release exosomes as a immune response, and they test for COVID-19. So, where was the first Chinese city to introduce 5G just before the virus broke out? Wuhan. 5G is a range of frequencies. It's not one frequency. Now they're starting here, but they want to go there. And they can already go there, and going there has great implications in the ways that I'm going to describe. If people go to that package for London Real viewers on my website, they'll see in the line of videos a New York doctor. This is a New York doctor who's so exasperated he made a video. He just kind of really stepped out of the line, out of the box. And he's been working at a emergency intensive care unit at a hospital in New York. And what he says on this video is, look, this is not COVID-19. It's not what we're told it is. He says, we were told, look at the pyramid, right? And everyone does as they're told. He said, we were told to treat people with lung problems that come to us as people who have an infectious disease called COVID-19. He said, that is not what we are seeing. After the interview, go and see him talk on the video. This is not what we're seeing, he said. He said, I've never seen anything like this in terms of what I'm seeing in the lungs of these people and what these people are suffering and dying from. This is what he said. Their lungs look like someone who's flying at 30,000 feet, and there's cabin pressure disappears, the oxygen disappears, and they slowly die of lack of oxygen. He said another analogy, it's like their lungs look like something I would expect if you took someone and you put them on the top of Everest with no acclimatization and obviously no breathing apparatus. You would expect their lungs to do that. He said, I don't know what's going on, but it's not COVID-19, it's not an infectious disease, and I've never seen anything like it. Now, and this is admitted by the telecommunications industry. 5G at 60 gigahertz, which is where they want to take it, and I say already bloody have on the quiet, stops the human body and blood absorbing oxygen. If someone is hit by 60 gigahertz frequencies of 5G, they will not be able to absorb enough oxygen. They would just collapse in the street. And those symptoms, that outcome, is so exactly what this doctor in New York is describing he is seeing, but says, I don't know what's going on, never seen anything like it. And you know, let me just bring this around. They have not had enough dead people, despite fixing the figures and getting as many people to die of COVID-19 as possible, to justify the fact that it's this vastly deadly virus. But at the same time, the death figures are basically not going up of all causes. They're building morgues. They're turning football pitches into morgues. They're doing it in many, many countries. They're having preparations for lots and lots of dead people. They don't fit, except just fixing the figures wouldn't justify filling those, because they'd never do it. And if they're building all these massive mortuaries, etc., and the figures start to go down, as they have in China, oh, we're through it, they're going to look total prats. But why are they doing it? Well, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I'm saying this is something that we should watch for. The more, this is why they're doing it now, rolling out all these 5G towers, etc., everywhere, these satellites, the more that they expand 5G, the more 5G is going to impact upon the population's health. And the more it impacts upon the population's health, the more they can say it's caused by COVID-19. And if they start firing out 5G at 60 gigahertz, they're going to have a lot of people who are going to keel over because they can't absorb oxygen. Now, if they did that, they could start filling mortuaries, and they could say, look, this is the virus, what it's doing, we must have even more lockdown, and it must go on and on and on and on. So we need to watch for that. Given the figures and the numbers we've had so far, if people start going down in large numbers, in anywhere in the world where there's 5G, and end up in these mortuaries, we should start to question big time and put two and two together. Because that happening on the trajectory of figures so far would be unexplainable, but not if they're taking oxygen out of the atmosphere. And it can be done in a very small area. You can target an old people's home, and you can take the oxygen out with 5G, and people will die, and you'll say COVID-19. And you know what's happening? And there's been, you know, what are now called citizen journalists, people who go out with their cameras and their phone cameras to film this stuff. What they're doing while the schools are closed, what they're doing while people are locked away, is they're putting 5G into schools. You know where else they're putting 5G? Into frickin' hospitals. They're putting 5G everywhere. And so once this is set up, they have the ability to manipulate people psychologically and physically. And where this is all leading, well, part of where it's all leading, is to the vaccine.
First of all, 5G towers in Belfast, Liverpool, Birmingham in the last week have been burned. And overnight, because people are responding. There's all this stuff going on in the Facebook groups. What do you think of that? And I know towards the end of this, you're going to tell us about next steps for us. But what do you think about that action?
It's not for me to tell anyone what to do, because that's their right to choose. But you look at the situation, and if 5G continues and reaches where they want to take it, human life as we've known it is over. I've been saying this for so long. Oh, you're mad, that David, that's mad. Oh yeah, okay. I'm not laughing now, are you? So people have to make a decision. You know, I am personally absolutely anti-violence against people, and I don't see violence against people taking us absolutely anywhere. It's just you know, if you use violence against people in the name of doing something you believe to be right, then you're just a mirror of what you are seeking to fight. You know, I have this phrase, what you fight, you become. What you hate, you become. But people will have to make their own decisions. All I will say, and repeat again, if this 5G continues and this rollout continues, that's it. So what people decide to do about that is up to them. But it's very clear that what's happened is people have been put under house arrest on this false premise. So there's no gathering, there's no ability to protest, And so they have free rein to rapidly deploy and expand 5G, while so many people have had their employment destroyed, have had their businesses destroyed because they are deemed by the government non-essential, whereas rapidly deploying 5G towers with all their destructive and psychological potential is deemed to be essential work. Now you put that little lot together and you can see that there is a massive conspiracy going on here to roll out 5G without protest, and that means it ain't good for humanity. And so where this is leading is a vaccine, and in that vaccine will be lots of genetic material, stuff that will trigger poison in the cells, which will trigger exosomes, which will, the virus. But also in that vaccine will be nanotechnology microchips. I mentioned a few minutes ago that Elon Musk had got permission for 1 million ground antennae to interact with his satellites. These nano microchips, which are being put into us in many ways, but let's keep with the vaccines, are well beyond the ability of human sight to see. That's why they're nano. And they are known as smart dust, of course, smart on everything. They're known as nanobots, they're known as neurobots, lots of different names they give them. Smart dust will do. And the idea is to put them in the body, and they will act within humans like the ground antenna act with the satellites of Musk. They connect humans to this grid, this technological sub-reality, this AI-controlled sub-reality. So we basically become nothing more than computer terminals. That's the idea. And so you have a situation where this is where the game is going. That you have this vaccine full of shite to control you and to undermine your health so that we can have more pandemics, or you can't mix with the rest of the community, you can't fly, etc. Now, this is the real reason why Gates and Gavi, this vaccine alliance, has developed this quantum tattoo so that they can tell who's had the vaccine and who hasn't, and there will be technology that you pass through which will pick it up to see if you when you're trying to get on a plane, oh no, you can't, you've not been vaccinated.
Is it like a chip inside of you?
Well, yeah, in simple terms, that's basically what it will be. Exactly what technology they come up with, we'll see. But the principle is exactly that. And when you pass through technology now at specific points, your temperature is going to be taken. We now have, because what we've got to understand is that the people that run Silicon Valley are lovely people. They care deeply about humanity. So, first of all, what they've been doing, they've just released it, people like Google, is they're releasing mobile phone tracking data to governments, so governments can see if there's any gathering of people during the lockdown.
Yeah, they found a bunch of kids who went to a spring break party on the beach, 70 of them, and they tracked them to 40 different states in America. I thought that was illegal to give their data up, but they're doing it.
Oh, once you have the lockdown and you suspend democracy, which is what's happened, and you enter a tyranny that can only be described as fascistic, there are no legalities for humans anymore, because the government does what it likes. And it's not the politicians, they're just clueless. It's the dark suits behind the government that drive it. So That's only one step from the microchip, which is where they want to go. Because there will be no human race as we know it if we don't get our arses in gear now, worldwide. And people have said to me over the years, Brian, a few people can't control the world, that's ridiculous. They've got half the frickin' world locked down under house arrest, tiny few people, in a matter of weeks. What do you mean they can't? They are. So, how long are we going to take it? How long are we going to take it? Because the next thing they'll start doing is sorting out the food. What can put people under more dependency than the state controlling food? And I'll tell you where this is going. I've said this before, but this is where it's going. They're moving eventually into a situation where food as we've known it will go. It will be synthetic food. What industry has been destroyed as much as any in the world as a result of this lockdown? Restaurants and etc. And they're not meant to exist in the long term because they want to control food. Because if they control food, they control you. Because if you don't do what you said, you don't get any food. This is where we're going, and ultimately to the AI connection to the human brain, where we won't even be thinking our own thoughts anymore. AI will be doing our thinking for us.
Is that through the nanotechnology?
Yeah.
Vaccine?
I mean, but they're telling us, Brian. This guy, Ray Kurzweil, another bleeding psychopath, in Silicon Valley, a Google executive, he says by 2030, humans will start to have their brains connected to AI. And these are his words, not mine. When that happens, AI will do more and more of human thinking until eventually human thinking as we know it will be virtually negligible. There is words I summarize. Now, we have a guy called Elon Musk. I didn't mention he was a psychopath, didn't I? And he came out some years ago, you might remember, said, AI could be the end of humanity. Yeah, right. And you know that. And so what does he do? He starts a company called Neuralink to connect the human brain to computers, right? And he also runs this SpaceX organization, putting satellites up, but he also runs Tesla cars, right? And they're electric cars, right? Electric cars. Why, British government's just done it, why are they phasing out petrol cars and diesel cars? Because where they're going is autonomous vehicles, where the computer will decide where you can go. Petrol car, you get in it, you drive where you want to go. When you're in an autonomous car, you will go only to the limits that the computer will take the car. And those computers will be encoded so that you go nowhere the government doesn't want you to go. And now, you can't have autonomous cars and petrol cars and diesel cars. So they're phasing out petrol and diesel on this ludicrous idea that humans are causing climate change, which is another 1% hoax run by computer models out of the same people that are running the computer models of the so-called virus. Everything you do and everything you purchase, A, we will know about, and B, we can decide any time if you can purchase or not. Because if you go into a store now, though, again, not as much as a few weeks ago, and you hand over a credit card, digital money, and they try your card and they say, sorry, it won't take your card. Computer won't take your card. So, okay, I'll pay cash then. So, when there's no cash and no, because this virus scam ticks every box for this cult. Everything I've said they want, they are justifying by this, what's happening. They're saying money's dangerous because you could catch the virus from it. Brackets, bollocks. And so, you know, people that used to take cash are not taking cash anymore because I might catch the big virus. And you've got the people, the company that's running the ATMs actually came out about 3-4 days ago and said by the end of the summer cash could be finished because of the virus. So,
and the UK just introduced plastic cash. It's probably hold the virus longer.
It's nothing to do with health. It's all about control. I mean, it's just such crap. Anyway, so when cash is gone, which is the idea, and you only have digital money, and what it's planned to be is everything on your microchip. See, totalitarian tiptoe, step, 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 step. They've now gone to your phone. They've gone from your cash, they've gone now from your credit card, and they've gone to your phone. So now it's digital, phone, everything on the phone, and that phone becomes the microchip. It's only one step away now. It's all in my books in the 90s. And so you go into a store and you pay with your chip or your whatever, and they say, sorry, computer won't take your card, or it won't take your digital money. So how are you going to purchase now? You ain't. And dissidents of this system, of which I will be one to my last frickin' breath, will go off the Christmas card list of the computer very early on. It's all about total and utter control.
Which is what they do in China now.
Yeah,
Again.
yeah. And as I was saying, this Hunger Games society is supposed to be it is fascism, it is communism, which are different names for the same tyrannies, really. Centralization of power in the hands of a few. But the real name, although the fascism and the communism, the way it plays out is basically the same, but the way it's done is different. It's a technocracy they're creating. And technocracies, a global technocracy, and technocracies are defined as societies that are controlled by bureaucrats, not elected politicians. They're going. That's the plan. They're going. The more they can discredit politicians in the public mind, the more the public will say, oh yeah, well they're useless anyway, yeah, let's have a technocracy. So it's run by bureaucrats, by scientists, by engineers, by technocrats. All these people in Silicon Valley are technocrats. And already the technocrats of Silicon Valley, and we should not forget Israel either, because that's the second Silicon Valley of the world now, staggering as it may seem, do your research. The technocrats are already running the world. Most politicians haven't got a clue what goes on in Silicon Valley, let alone understanding legislating for it. They're running it. The Gateses are running the whole vaccine operation. They're running the World Health Organization, you know? And so the technocrats are already taking over. And the more you move into this technological, technocratic society of AI, the technocrats are taking over because politicians become irrelevant. And let me say this, Brian. Let me say this to the broadcasters. Let me say this to everybody who's just accepting this. Let me say it to law enforcement. Daddy, what were you doing when the global fascist state came in and the economic system was destroyed, and now we have to do everything the state says, or we don't get our pittance every month? What were you doing, Daddy? The population. I was just sitting there, darling. Journalists. I was helping to bring it in, darling, by lying to the public. Law enforcement. I was enforcing it, darling. All the bloody best with that conversation with your kids and grandkids when you face the fact and the reality of what's going on. And you know, I say this to law enforcement, you know, what are you doing enforcing fascism? We're at a point in the road here.
What do the rest of us do? What do we do?
It's not for me to tell people what to do. It's for me to point out the consequences of sitting on your arse, letting a handful of psychopaths and idiots, because that's the dynamic, destroy your future, destroy your livelihood, destroy your kids' future and your grandkids' future. You go on sitting on your arse, and that is an absolute gimme. What have you got to lose? What is there to lose? Most people have lost everything anyway. You know, in the old Yellow Brick Road, Wizard of Oz, they seem to be dealing with an all-powerful force. And when they looked behind the curtain, it was an old bloke who had no power at all. And this cult expresses its power by persuading the target population that it has power. Its power is in our acquiescence to that illusion of power. We now have the chance to break the spell, to break the mind spell, and see behind the curtain. And what we'll find is something that's not powerful at all once we stop acquiescing to it. The greatest way to solve a problem is to remove the cause of it. You know, you can find a solution to a problem and then that will lead to something else, will lead to another problem. Or you can look at why the problem is happening and you remove the cause. And when you remove the cause of a problem has to disappear. It has to. Because the cause that's making the problem has disappeared, therefore the problem has disappeared. And acquiescence to power, the illusion of power, is how we got here. And the solution is not, you know, do this, do that, fight this, fight that. It's stop acquiescing to the illusion of power and stop being told what to do when you know it's not what you should be doing by the illusion of power. And then the problem, which is the illusion of power in others, is gone. And the world has changed, because the world today is a manifestation of acquiescence to power. That's all it is. Never more extreme than it is now. Remove that cause and the problem disappears. And it will be the cult that will be queuing to mass buy the toilet paper.
I think that's exactly where we're going to leave this, David.
I'm going to shake your hand. And you dare give me COVID-19 that doesn't exist.